Tonight, federal authorities have cut a deal for El Mencho's daughter to plead guilty, now planned for a high noon hearing on Friday in D.C. court.
In February 2020, Jessica Oseguera flew out to Washington, D.C., hoping to attend her brother Ruben El Menchito Oseguera's court hearing. But what she didn't see coming? Her own arrest, turning her trip into the beginning of her downfall. Here are the tragic fates of famous female drug lords in prison.
Now to the wife of notorious Mexican drug lord El Chapo, Emma Coronel Aispuro, is due in court after being arrested on international drug trafficking charges. She's also accused of helping her husband in that daring 2015 prison break.
In 2007, after entering the Coffee and Guava Festival beauty pageant in Canelas, Durango, Mexico, Emma Coronel Aispuro held a party on Three Kings Day in honor of her candidacy, where she reportedly met Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who traveled to Canelas to meet her, a meeting that changed the course of her life forever. Born July 2, 1989, in California, but raised in Mexico, Emma wasn't a stranger to the cartel world. Her father was a high-ranking member of the Sinaloa cartel, and by the time she turned 18, she had caught the eye of El Chapo. For years, she played the role of devoted wife, staying out of the spotlight while El Chapo dominated the drug trade. But when he was captured and sentenced to life in a U.S. prison, things changed. No longer just a cartel wife, she became a key player, having already facilitated his daring prison escapes and acting as a middleman for cartel operations, pretty much living a lavish life funded by blood money. But the U.S. authorities were watching, and in 2021, they made their move. Emma was eventually arrested at Dulles International in Virginia. The charges? Drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to help El Chapo escape. Facing decades in prison, she took the only way out, by cooperating. She pleads guilty, hoping for leniency. But even that deal couldn't spare her from the fate she's trying to outrun. Sentenced to 3 years in a federal prison, Emma finds herself locked up in Federal Medical Center Carswell, a place known for notorious high-profile female inmates. Gone are designer outfits and luxury vacations. Now we have another prisoner, stripped of status. Life at Carswell was pretty harsh. The facility's known for overcrowding and medical neglect. Far from the world that she once knew. Whispers of cartel enemies and prison gangs circulated, and despite her cooperation with authorities, her safety was never guaranteed. She had traded one prison for another, only this time we don't have tunnels to escape. By the time she was released in 2023, Emma was no longer the untouchable queen of the cartel world, her husband serving a life sentence, her fortune's gone, and her name was forever tainted. The fairy tale's over, and in the end, her greatest crime wasn't just marrying El Chapo. It was believing that she could ever walk away unscathed. In 2005, while having everything she ever dreamed of and still chasing some dreams, Angie Sanclemente Valencia met and fell in love with a very wealthy and powerful narcotic boss who was known as the Monster, a love that began her downfall. At first glance, you would think Angie was for the runway, not for a prison cell. A former Colombian beauty queen, she had that kind of life that most could only dream of: glamour, wealth, and the title of Coffee Queen of Colombia. But behind that dazzling smile and expensive outfit, we had a woman that was deep into drug trafficking, and in the end her world came crashing down in the most humiliating way possible. Now, Angie's story isn't like your typical cartel queen that's born into the business. She started off as a model, capturing hearts and turning heads. But after a failed romance with a powerful Mexican drug lord, she decided that she wasn't going to be some kingpin's trophy. She was actually going to be the queen. Now, using her charm and connections, she built her own cocaine smuggling operation. Instead of getting hardened sicarios, she got some young, beautiful women, models just like her, whom she called her angels. Now, their job was to smuggle cocaine on commercial flights, using their beauty and innocence to avoid suspicion. And for a while, this worked. The money was rolling, and Angie was living a life of luxury between Colombia, Mexico, and Argentina. But every empire has its weak link. In 2009, one of her recruits, Ariel L., was caught at the Buenos Aires Ezeiza airport with nearly 50 kilos of cocaine. Under pressure, the model cracked, and suddenly, Angie became one of Argentina's most wanted women. So she goes into hiding, jumping between luxury hotels, changing her appearance, and trying to stay ahead of the law. But in May 2010, her luck ran out. Police finally caught her in a Buenos Aires hostel. Angie was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months in prison, landing first at, Centro Federal de Detención de Mujeres Unidad Número 13-1 in Ezeiza, one of Argentina's most notorious women's prisons, and it wasn't long before reality hit her, like a freight train. The cells are overcrowded here, the guards are ruthless, and it's hard to escape the dangers lurking in every corner. Inmates resented her beauty and past life of privilege, and the fact that she had no real cartel backing kind of made her an easy target, proved by the many attacks that she would suffer from fellow inmates. But her biggest enemy? Time. She had once been at the top of the world, gracing magazine covers and living a life of luxury. Now the days are dragging in a never-ending loop of loneliness. But then she was transferred to the number 3 unit of that same compound, and things got worse. Depression sets in, isolation's unbearable. You don't have powerful allies, no fortune left outside, and no one willing to risk breaking you out. You're just another forgotten inmate. And by the time she was released in 2017, the world had moved on. The modeling industry had no place for a former drug queen, and the cartel world wouldn't even trust her. She lost everything: career, reputation, freedom. Ironically, Angie wasn't remembered as a queen pin or a beauty queen. She was just a cautionary tale of how greed and ambition can turn even the most glamorous lives into tragedies. In 2010, Clara Elena Laborin was abducted outside her home in Hermosillo, Sonora, after which she was released 13 days later, hands and feet bound and blindfolded. Now, this is nothing compared to what she would eventually face after taking over leadership of cartel operations. Born February 19, 1964, in Agua Prieta, Sonora, Clara wasn't just another elegant, well-dressed socialite. Behind the designer clothes and polished image, she was feared in the Mexican cartel world. Known as La Señora or La Patrona, Clara wasn't just a wife of Héctor Beltran Leyva. She's a key player too in the deadly BLO. And just like many before her, she would learn the hard way that in this drug trade, power doesn't last. Clara's rise to power started through her husband, Héctor, who led the BLO after his brother Arturo was killed in a bloody 2009 shootout. Now, many cartel wives should stay in the background, but Clara takes an active role in operations, allegedly handling finances, managing drug shipments, and even ordering hits on rivals. Authorities believe that she played a crucial role in keeping the cartel alive, especially after Héctor's arrest in 2014. But the more power she gained, the more enemies she made. And in 2010, she was kidnapped by a rival group and paraded on video, a rare humiliation for a woman of her status. Now, she was eventually freed, but the message was clear. Even La Patrona wasn't untouchable. Her luck finally ran out in 2016 when Mexican authorities arrested her in Hermosillo, Sonora. Charged with organized crime and drug trafficking, Clara is thrown into a high-max security prison where the walls close in on her fast. Again, gone are luxury mansions and extravagant parties. The power that once made her untouchable has disappeared. Prison's a different kind of battlefield. Being a high-profile cartel figure didn't earn her much respect. If anything, it kind of made her a target. Unlike men in her position who could still pull some strings from behind bars, her influence vanished the moment she was locked away. Rumors swirled that she struggled to adjust. Her once imposing presence reduced to just another inmate trying to survive. The psychological toll was pretty hard as well. She had once dictated the fates of others, deciding who lived and who died. And now she has no control, not even over prison guards, not over a brutal inmate hierarchy, not even over her own future. She spends days in isolation, tormented by the knowledge that her time as a feared queenpin was over. And as the years passed, the BLO would crumble without strong leadership. Outside, she's a forgotten name, abandoned by the organization she once helped run. Her enemies no longer feared her, and her allies had either been killed or moved on. Eventually, Clara Elena Laborin wasn't just imprisoned, she was erased, a relic of a cartel era that had left her behind. In 2010, Ana Maria Hernandez became a fugitive for drug trafficking and bribery charges. Little did she know that her actions, though, would eventually catch up with her. Ana Maria Hernandez, nicknamed La Muñeca, or the Doll, due to her striking appearance and lavish lifestyle, would seem more suited for the pages of a fashion magazine than the annals of cartel history. But beneath the glamorous exterior was a woman deeply entrenched in the dangerous world of drug trafficking. Now, between June and October 2005, Ana Marie orchestrated a sophisticated cocaine smuggling operation from Juarez, Mexico, into the U.S. Her partner in crime, none other than her husband, Daniel Ledesma, a U.S. Custom and Border Protection officer stationed in El Paso, Texas. Leveraging his position, he would facilitate the seamless entry of cocaine-laden vehicles into the U.S., bypassing standard inspections, a betrayal of his badge that netted him a cool $100,000. Ana Marie's role was pivotal. She coordinated the logistics, ensuring the traffickers knew exactly when and where to cross, aligning with her husband's shifts. Now, this meticulous planning would allow him to smuggle hundreds of kilos of cocaine into cities like Chicago, St. Louis, and Panama City, Florida. However, the law would eventually catch up with them. In 2010, they'd both be arrested. Ledesma got 10 years in prison, while his wife pled guilty to conspiracy to import a controlled substance and bribery of a public official. But before sentencing, she fled to Mexico, evading U.S. authorities for nearly 5 years. But what have we learned? Freedom doesn't last forever. In October 2015, Mexican authorities caught up with her in Chihuahua City. That was a reality check. She's put into this dull gray jumpsuit like the rest and transferred to a place in Mexico City where they begin processing her to send her right back to the U.S. Eventually, the baby doll drug lord was extradited and had to face the grim consequences of her actions. In 2018, Ana Marie was given 11 years in federal prison. Another woman from designer clothing and high-end shoes, even a $30,000 in-ground pool, now is finding herself in a harsh, cruel cell. Now, life in a U.S. federal prison for inmates like Ana Marie is a far cry from the luxury she once remembered. She's being watched 24/7. Respect is earned, not bought. And the constant tension of prison politics makes survival a daily battle. Now she's living with the reality of her choices, serving time at a place indifferent to her former status. In December 2014, after being mounted by extreme pressure, Marlory Chacon pled guilty to conspiring to smuggle cocaine into the U.S. However, that would be a dangerous move, taking her through an unexpected path. Marlory Chacon Russell, often dubbed the Queen of the South, was a prominent Guatemalan drug trafficker whose operations spanned from Colombia to the U.S. Born in 1972, she would rise throughout her life to build her business awareness and strategic alliances and become one of Central America's most influential narcotics dealers. Her network extended throughout Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and Mexico, facilitating the movement of massive cocaine shipments northward. In 2012, the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, designated Chacon as a significant foreign narcotics trafficker under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. Now, this action would freeze her assets within the U.S. and prohibit U.S. citizens from engaging in business with her. OFAC had saw that her organization was laundering a lot of drug money through various Guatemalan businesses. And as a result of this mounting pressure, Marlory had surrendered to the U.S. authorities in 2014, pleading guilty to charges of conspiracy to import cocaine into the U.S. Her case got national attention not just because she's high profile, but the secrecy surrounding her legal proceedings. In May 2015, she's sentenced in a Miami federal court. However, the details of that sentence were sealed, leading to widespread speculation. Reports suggested that Chacon cooperated extensively with the U.S. prosecutors, providing valuable intel on other narcotics traffickers, which likely influenced the terms of her sentencing. And because that sentence was kept quiet, people started to speculate, with many saying that she faced less than 10 years in prison due to her cooperation. Well, that level of confidentiality is unusual and does underscore the potential risk she might face from cartel members due to her collaboration with authorities. Now, we don't have specific details of her prison experience, but it's plausible that Chacon was placed in protective custody or some kind of witness protection to mitigate the potential threats from cartels. Now, if she was spending time in prison, she would have been very isolated. And we learn that in a world of crime where alliances are fragile, the fall from power can be both swift and unforgiving. August 2021, Guadalupe Fernandez Valencia offered a tearful apology to her family and the judge, saying,
"I wish I could find the words to convince you of how sorry I am."
However, that was a sharp contrast to the person who'd once had more than 3 decades in the drug business. Born back in 1960, she ascended the cartel's ranks, becoming a pivotal figure in its operations. Her moniker, La Patrona, or the Boss, was a testament to her authority and influence within the organization. Guadalupe's journey into the cartel's upper ranks was marked by an experience of logistics and finance. She played a crucial role, overseeing the distribution of a lot of narcotics heading into the U.S., and she would orchestrate in the laundering of millions of dollars back to Mexico. Her collaboration with Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, alias Alfredillo, and the sons of infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman would really underscore her significance within the hierarchy. In February 2016, her reign had faced a significant setback when she was arrested in Culiacan, Sinaloa. Now, the arrest came merely a month after El Chapo's capture, signaling a concerted effort by authorities to dismantle the cartel's leadership. Subsequently, she was extradited to the U.S., and Valencia faced charges that could have led to a life sentence. However, in 2019, she enters a plea agreement acknowledging her involvements in narcotics trafficking and money laundering conspiracies. Prosecutors recognize her substantial cooperation and recommend a sentence of 10 to 15 years. By August 2021, she stood before a Chicago federal court at 61. Her once commanding presence was subdued. Expressing remorse, she sought forgiveness from her family, acknowledging the pain she'd caused. Now, due to her cooperation, the court gives her 10 years in federal prison. Given what she'd already spent in custody, that translated to approximately 3 more years. And she finds out right away that her influence is not the same in this place. She was out there running complex drug operations, and now she's in this small cell. She's done commanding and controlling anything, and now it's strict routines, lost freedom, and the constant noise of life behind bars. Regardless, she had cooperated with authorities, maybe hinting at a possible shot at redemption. Her information led to the cartel's inner workings and really helped support a wider law enforcement effort. In October 2023, after serving her sentence, Fernandez Valencia was released from U.S. custody, but this was actually shaded with uncertainty because, as a foreign felon, she now faces immediate deportation to Mexico, a land where her past affiliations could pose significant threats. The evolving dynamics of the Sinaloa cartel, especially with Chapitos in charge, meant that alliances had shifted and old loyalties might no longer offer protection. Could you imagine going back to a place like that? In February 2020, while trying to get to a court hearing for her brother, Ruben El Menchito Oseguera Gonzalez, who'd been extradited to the U.S. on drug trafficking charges, Jessica Oseguera traveled to Washington, D.C. Now, Jessica was known as La Negra, born back in February 14, 1987, in San Francisco, California. She's the oldest daughter of Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, the infamous leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. Jessica's life is tied to one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations. Now, growing up, Jessica had dual citizenship in the U.S. and Mexico, pursuing higher education in Guadalajara, earning a degree in marketing. And now, leveraging her academic background, she would venture into the business world, establishing several enterprises in Mexico. Among these would be an advertising agency, a tequila brand, a sushi restaurant, and a rental cabin business. However, these places were later identified by U.S. authorities as fronts linked to CJ&G money laundering. In April 2015, OFAC had sanctioned the CJ&G and its affiliates, including Jessica's businesses, under that Kingpin Act. Now, despite receiving multiple notifications about these sanctions, Jessica continued her involvement with the flagged businesses. She even tried renaming some of the businesses, altering ownership records, but that failed to evade U.S. scrutiny. Now, the turning point would be back to that court case with her brother, El Menchito, who was extradited on those drug trafficking charges. When she got to the courthouse, Jessica was arrested for her continued financial engagements with sanctioned entities. Facing serious charges now, she pled guilty in March 2021 to violating the Kingpin Act, and by June 2021, she's sentenced to 30 months in federal prison. Now, Jessica's at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. She was managing businesses and now is sitting in a cell. The regimented routines, loss of personal autonomy, the challenges inherent in prison life present significant hardships. And let's not forget, she's the daughter of a high-profile cartel leader, really adding layers of complexity to her imprisonment. Now, despite the adversities, Jessica's time in prison was relatively brief. She benefited from the First Step Act, a U.S. law enacted back in December 2018, aiming at reforming the federal prison system and reducing recidivism. Now, this allows for sentence reductions for eligible inmates demonstrating good behavior and participation in rehabilitative programs. Consequently, though, Jessica was released in February 2022, having served approximately 2 years of her sentence.
Mexican prosecutors will now be able to put Sandra Avila Beltran on trial again for her alleged role in Mexico's deadly drugs war.
Sandra Avila Beltran, aka the Queen of the Pacific, was born into a dynasty of drug lords, connected to the infamous Felix Gallardo and even close ties to the Sinaloa cartel. She played a major role in smuggling Colombian cocaine into Mexico. Now, for years, she managed to keep a low profile until one mistake cost her everything. In 2007, after her son's kidnapping led authorities straight to her, Sandra was arrested in Mexico City. Now, she said she was just a simple housewife, but prosecutors weren't buying it. She was eventually locked up at the notorious Santa Marta Azatitla prison, a place known for housing some of Mexico's most dangerous female criminals. And like many others we already talked about, it's a stark contrast from the life she once lived. Here in her cramped space, she would complain about inhumane conditions like cockroach infestations, bad food, and a strict ban on outside meals. Now, somehow she had managed to get some Botox injections, which kind of sparked outrage and led to the firing of the prison director. But it seemed her troubles were far from over. In 2012, the U.S. came a-knockin', and she was extradited to Florida, where she faced some drug trafficking charges, and after striking a plea deal, she was given 70 months at a U.S. federal prison. American prisons may be a little different, a little stricter, more controlled, but for someone like Sandra, prison politics is just another game. By 2013, she was sent right back to Mexico, only to be arrested again, and this time for money laundering. She was placed at the Max Security Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 4 in Nayarit, spending 2 years in total isolation. Now, for someone who commanded the attention of cartel bosses, the silence was deafening. After 7 years in and out of prison, Sandra's finally released in 2015. But the world had changed. The cartel had moved on without her. Now, she was free, but just a ghost of her former self. A reminder that in the drug trade, even the queens eventually fall.
Get ready to hear about the godmother of cocaine. She is Griselda Blanco, was a 69-year-old mother of 4, seen here in one of her many, many mugshots. As of yesterday, she is dead.
Oh, if there was ever a woman who truly embodied the dark, ruthless world of drug trafficking, it's gotta be Blanco. Dubbed the Black Widow, this woman was a force of nature. Rising from the slums of Colombia, she builds a cocaine empire running from Medellin to Miami, leaving behind a bloody trail of bodies. And by the late 70s and early 80s, Blanco's running one of the most feared drug operations in the world. She pioneered the infamous cocaine cowboys era, smuggling thousands of kilos of cocaine into the U.S. Her methods? Ruthless. She didn't hesitate to take out anybody, lovers, haters. She killed her own husbands. Now they say she ordered over 200 murders, some in broad daylight, drive-by shootings, turning Miami into a war zone. But with that kind of power comes big enemies, and Blanco had plenty. Back in '85, the DEA finally caught up with her in Irvine, California. Now they charged her with drug trafficking, but soon prosecutors linked her to multiple murders. She was sent to a federal prison in New York, where she continued running her empire, proving that a prison cell ain't gonna do anything. Now, prison life wasn't easy, but Griselda adapted. She manipulated guards, used her wealth to buy anything, and kept her connections strong. But things take a turn in '94 when authorities try to pin 3 murder charges on her, including the killing of a boy in a botched assassination attempt. If convicted, she can face the death penalty. But Griselda's smart. She found a way to escape the worst. In 1998, after serving nearly 20 years, she struck a plea deal, managing to get deported back to Colombia instead of facing further prosecution. It was a shocking twist. Yet one of the most notorious drug lords just free all of a sudden. But the streets of Medellin hadn't changed. She knew where she was going, and now she's not the feared godmother of cocaine. There's a new generation of drug lords, and they don't have any use for her. And there was enemies out there who hadn't forgotten her brutal past. So in 2012, while leaving a butcher shop in Medellin, 2 gunmen on a motorcycle pull up and then execute her. 2 bullets to the head. Griselda Blanco had built an empire on violence. But in the end, she couldn't even outrun her own legacy. The Black Widow was not untouchable.